Welcome to True Horror Vault. Beneath countless old homes across America lie basements often dismissed as simple storage rooms. But behind every aging wall, every rusted pipe, and every locked wooden door, something may be hiding, something for which there is still no official explanation. For decades, many families have kept these events a secret, believing no one would ever believe them. Today's incidents come from ordinary families across America. All names have been changed to protect personal privacy. However, the details of these events, exactly as reported to us, are presented without alteration. So, slowly open the basement door and step down, one step deeper into the dark. Story 1. The last room in the basement was never meant to be opened. My name is Jake Morgan. It was October 2022. My wife Emily and I bought an almost century-old house in the small town of Norwich, Connecticut. The house was surprisingly cheap. The real estate agent only said one thing: the basement is a bit old. Just clean it up and it'll be fine. We didn't pay much attention to it at the time. An old house naturally comes with an old basement. For the first few weeks, everything was completely normal. The upper part of the house was beautiful: hardwood floors, a fireplace, large windows. Only, whenever I stepped into the basement, I felt a strange coldness, an icy chill that wasn't from the winter air. It felt as if someone was watching me with ice-cold eyes. One Saturday, I decided to clean the entire basement. Emily was cooking upstairs. I grabbed a flashlight and went down. Stepping into the basement, I saw layers of dust everywhere: broken chairs, old trunks, a wooden rocking horse, and a few rusted toolboxes. Nothing had been touched for years. After an hour of cleaning, I pulled away a heavy wardrobe standing against the left wall, and I froze. Behind the wardrobe was a small wooden door. The door was secured from the outside with a thick iron chain. Surprised, I called Emily. She came down and asked, "Did you see this before?" I shook my head. Carved faintly above the door were the words, "Do not open." We both laughed. We thought the previous owner had written it as a joke. Emily went back upstairs. I unhooked the chain. As soon as I opened the door, a wave of cold air blasted out, like opening a freezer that had been shut for decades. Inside was a tiny room, barely 5 feet deep. A wooden chair, old wallpaper peeling off the walls, and a child's toy horse in the corner. But the most bizarre detail was small, bare footprints pressed into the dust on the floor. It looked as though someone had walked through just moments ago. I swung the flashlight around. There was no one else in the room. I convinced myself it must be tracks from a rat or some other animal. I closed the door and finished my work. That very night, the first incident occurred. It was around 2 a.m. I heard it clearly. From the basement, someone was slowly rolling a wooden ball. Tap, tap, tap. Emily woke up too. She whispered, "Are you hearing that?" I said nothing. I just listened. Then, a child's laughter, very faint, coming from far away. I mustered the courage to go downstairs. Reaching the basement, I saw everything was just as I had left it, except the small room I had unlocked. Its door was wide open again. I was certain I had closed it. Standing in front of the door, I felt as if someone was sitting inside the darkness. I flashed the light. Nothing was there. I closed the door once more and came back upstairs. The next morning, Emily told me she had a dream during the night. A little boy sitting in the basement, repeating just one sentence: "Play with me." I didn't press the topic further. But after that night, the same sounds echoed every single evening. The wooden ball, a child's footsteps, the scraping sound of a chair being dragged. One day, I returned from the office to find Emily looking deathly pale. When I asked her what happened, she said she went down at noon to run the washing machine. Right then, a voice from inside that small room called out, "Mom." Emily thought I was playing a prank on her, but I was at work at the time. That same night, we contacted the previous owner of the house. After much pleading, the old man finally spoke. "Seal that room shut again," he said. I asked, "Why?" He was silent for a long moment before replying. In 1974, the previous owner's 8-year-old son disappeared in that basement. The police searched the entire house and never found him. Only his toy was found inside that small room. Ever since, whoever opened that door didn't stay there long. A chill ran through my entire body. but I refused to believe it. I thought it was just an old superstition. 2 days later, the most terrifying thing happened. It was 3:17 a.m. I woke up because outside our bedroom door, a small child was walking. Thump, thump, thump. I opened the door and looked outside. No one was there. Right then, the basement door downstairs slowly swung open on its own. I felt a compulsion, as if I was being summoned below. Against my own will, I started walking down the stairs. Reaching the bottom, I saw the small room's door wide open. The wooden chair was no longer in the corner. It was positioned right in the middle of the doorway, and sitting on it was a small red rubber ball. I stared for a few seconds. Then, right beside my ear, a child whispered, "You're too late." I spun around immediately. No one was there. But when the flashlight beam fell back onto the room, the chair was empty. The ball was gone. Right at that moment, a tiny, ice-cold hand touched my ankle. I screamed and bolted up the stairs. After locking the door behind me, I looked down. On the back of my shoes were 5 small, wet, muddy footprints of a child. Yet, not a single drop of rain had fallen outside that day. The very next morning, I called a carpenter and had that small room permanently sealed shut with brick and mortar. Within a week, we put the house up for sale. Strangely, after leaving the house, everything returned to normal. But even today, when I wake up in the middle of the night, I can clearly hear a child's voice whispering very close to my ear. "You're going to open the door again, aren't you?" Story 2. The basement mirror never showed my reflection. My name is Sarah Collins. I grew up on the outskirts of Akron, Ohio. After my father passed away in early winter 2021, I moved into his old house to live alone. The house had been in our family for 3 generations. Ever since I was little, there was one strict rule. My father never allowed me to go into the basement alone. Whenever I asked why, he would simply say, "There are very old things down there. Don't touch them." I assumed it was out of fear of structural collapse, or perhaps rats. After my father passed, I began organizing the house on my own. It took 2 days to clean the upper floors. Finally, only the basement remained. Opening the door, I was greeted by that familiar scent: damp concrete, old wood, rusted iron pipes, and a chill that felt as though it was rising from the depths of the earth. Holding a flashlight, I stepped down. Walls lined with wooden shelves held hundreds of old glass bottles. In one corner stood a broken sewing machine, my grandmother's old trunk, and at the very back, a massive object covered in a sheet. I pulled the cloth away and froze. It was an enormous 7-foot-tall antique mirror framed in dark oak wood. Intricate carvings adorned the upper section. Carved faintly at the bottom of the frame were the words, "Whitmore and Sons, 1911. The mirror was impossibly clear. After all these years, it hadn't rusted or tarnished at all. I looked at my reflection. Everything was normal. Suddenly, I felt like my reflection moved a second late. I rubbed my eyes and looked again. This time, it moved normally. I told myself, I've been working too long. My eyes are tired. I brushed it off. That very night, the first strange occurrence happened. It was 2 a.m. I was lying upstairs in bed. Suddenly, from below, the sound of fingers dragging slowly across glass. Screech, screech, as if someone was dragging their fingernails across a massive mirror. I gathered my courage and went downstairs. Reaching the basement, I saw water pooled on the floor in front of the mirror, but none of the pipes were leaking. On the surface of the water were small, bare footprints. They led up and stopped right in front of the mirror. And after that, no more footprints. It was as if someone had walked right into the mirror. The next day, I spoke with my elderly neighbor, Mr. Howard. Hearing about the mirror, he went completely silent. Then, very slowly, he asked, "Your father never got rid of that?" I replied, "No." He sighed. "It would have been better if he had." Surprised, I asked for the reason. He said, "Your grandfather bought that mirror at an old estate sale. Ever since, people in that house saw things in the mirror that weren't there in reality." I laughed it off as superstition. Nothing more. But on the third night, I realized it was no superstition. I had gone down to do laundry. A single yellow light bulb dangled in the basement. I suddenly glanced toward the mirror, and My heart froze in my chest. Where I was standing, I wasn't in the mirror. My reflection was standing nearly 10 feet away. In a pitch-black corner, it was looking directly at me. But I was not standing there. I closed my eyes. I looked again. Everything was normal. I tried to convince myself it was a hallucination. But from that day on, every single day, the reflection began to change bit by bit. Sometimes it smiled before I did. Sometimes it closed its eyes before I blinked. Sometimes it just stared at me while I was looking away. I couldn't sleep. One night, I mustered the courage to start a video recording on my phone, thinking everything would be captured on camera. I stood in front of the mirror and stared at myself. Everything was normal, no issues. But watching the video back later, I saw myself standing completely still, while the reflection inside the mirror slowly turned its head, looked at the camera, and smiled. My entire body began to shake. The very next day, I decided to remove the mirror. 2 workers arrived, but to my surprise, the moment they touched the mirror, one of them exclaimed, "Why is this so cold?" One worker suddenly pulled his hand back, claiming he felt as though someone from inside the mirror had grabbed his fingers and pulled. The workers left without finishing the job. I was left standing alone. Suddenly, the room inside the mirror transformed. I was no longer seeing my basement. Instead, it showed a dark room, old candles flickering on the walls, mud covering the floor, and standing there were 4 people. They were all staring right at me. Slowly, together, they smiled. I tried to step back, but I couldn't, because from among them, another figure that looked exactly like me stepped forward. She stood right in front of the mirror and raised a hand. I hadn't raised my hand, but she had. Then her lips moved. There was no sound, but I could clearly read her lips. My turn now. Right then, all the lights in the basement went out. I sprinted up the stairs, locked the door, and didn't go back down all night. The next morning, I gathered the courage to go back. Where the mirror once stood, there was only a bare wall. It was as if nothing had ever been there. However, lying on the floor was a small slip of paper with my father's handwriting. "Sarah, if the mirror ever watches you longer than you watch it, do not stand there for even a second, because then it is no longer your reflection." I left that house long ago, but even today, every morning before washing my face in the bathroom mirror, I double-check to make sure my reflection is moving at the exact same time I am. Story 3. The man who knocked on the basement door every night at 3:13 a.m. My name is Mark Reynolds. I was born in Wichita Falls, Texas. In November 2020, my wife Laura, our 8-year-old son Ben, and I moved into a quiet, ordinary American home on the outskirts of town. The house wasn't very large. Single story, a small front lawn, dried oak trees in the backyard, and a concrete basement underneath. When purchasing the house, the previous owner, Thomas Green, said one very strange thing. "If anyone ever knocks on the basement door after 3 in the morning, do not open it." I chuckled and asked, "Burglars?" He shook his head. "If it's a burglar, call the police. But if someone calls out your name after knocking, still, do not open it." I thought the old man was just a bit eccentric. We bought the house anyway. For the first 2 weeks, everything was normal. Ben started attending school, Laura was decorating the house, and I was working from home. Only one detail caught my attention. There were 3 heavy padlocks fitted on the outside of the basement door. I thought one lock was more than enough, so I removed 2 of them. I was about to unlock the last one when Laura said, "Leave them be. The previous owner must have put them there for a reason." I laughed it off. Maybe he watched too many movies. Then came November 21st. That night, I suddenly woke up. The digital clock read 3:13 a.m. Right then, knock. 2 seconds of silence. Knock, knock. At first, I thought it was pipe noise, but the sound clearly originated from inside the lower floor. The basement door. Laura whispered in her sleep. "Did you hear that?" I got up and went downstairs. Reaching the living room, I saw the basement door standing completely still. No one was there. The sound had stopped. I returned to bed, thinking it was just my imagination. The next night, at precisely 3:13 a.m., knock, Knock, knock. This time, following the knock, a male voice spoke in a very low whisper. Mark! My heart plummeted into my stomach. Laura was fully awake now. In a trembling voice, she warned, "Don't go down there." I mustered the nerve to walk up to the stairs. From the other side of the door, the sound echoed again. "Mark, open the door." I asked, "Who is it?" No answer. Only, slowly, the sound of fingernails scratching against the wood. I did not open the door that night. The next morning, 3 long scratch marks were gouged into the door, fresh as if carved by something razor sharp. Ben asked, "Dad, who came over last night?" Surprised, I asked, "How do you know about that?" He replied quite casually, "That man told me you were too scared to open the door." A cold sweat broke out over me. "Which man?" Ben said, "The man whose face you can't see." That very day, I called the previous owner, Thomas. After a long pause, he asked, "Has it started?" I said, "Yes." He took a deep breath. "I'm coming over tonight." At 2:50 a.m. that night, Thomas arrived holding an old wooden box. Inside was an old Bible, several yellowed photographs, and a cassette tape. I asked, "What are these?" He explained. In 1984, the original owner of this house, Daniel Harper, opened the basement door one night. His wife was upstairs. She only heard a single scream. After that, Daniel never returned. The police searched the entire house and dug up the yard outside. No body, no blood, nothing was ever found. Except there were 5 bloody handprints on the inside of the basement door. 3:12 a.m. The 3 of us stood in front of the door. Laura and Ben were upstairs. Thomas instructed, "No matter what you hear, do not open the door." On the clock, 3:13 a.m. 1 second, 2 seconds. Then, knock, knock, knock. This time, the voice was even clearer. "Thomas." The old man's face drained a color, because the voice on the other side was his deceased wife's voice. He trembled. "Mary?" I grabbed his arm firmly. "No." Then the voice shifted. "Mark." Then Laura. Then Ben. It was mimicking the voices of everyone we knew. Suddenly, Ben screamed from upstairs, "Dad, why are you down there?" We rushed upstairs. Ben was shaking uncontrollably. He said, "You were just in my room a moment ago." I said, "I haven't come upstairs for even a second." Crying, Ben said, "You looked at me and just said, 'Open the door.' But your eyes were completely black." We rushed back downstairs, and what we saw froze our blood. The basement door was ajar. None of us had touched it. Through the crack, there was only darkness. No light, no stairs visible, as if there was no longer a basement beyond that door. Only an infinite black void. Right then, from the depths of that darkness, a figure slowly stepped forward. First a hand, then a shoulder, then a face. I held my breath and stared. The person was me, exactly like me. Same clothes, same face. Except his eyes were entirely black. He smiled and said, "Now, will you come to this side?" Without a word, Thomas used all his strength to slam the door shut. Together, the 3 of us threw all the padlocks into place. The very next morning, we permanently sealed the entire basement entrance with concrete and put the house up for sale. 6 years have passed since then. I have never returned to that house. However, every year, on the night of November 21st, at precisely 3:13 a.m., I receive a call on my phone from an unknown number. I never pick up, because once I made the mistake of answering. On the other end, a voice simply said, "The door is still open." Story 4. The old basement refrigerator opened on its own every winter. My name is David Walker. I grew up in a small town in Litchfield County, Connecticut. In January 2023, my wife Rachel and I left the noise of the city and moved into an old farmhouse built in 1928. It featured wooden walls, a stone foundation, and a massive basement deep underground. We loved it because it was peaceful, surrounded only by pine trees with no close neighbors around. However, the previous owner, Edward Hayes, made one strange request when handing over the keys. There's an old refrigerator in the basement. Even if it breaks down, never throw it away, and if it opens on its own during winter, do not go near it. I chuckled and asked, how could a fridge open without electricity? He simply looked at me and said, not everything runs on electricity. I laughed at his words that day. Later, I realized there was nothing to laugh about. For the first few weeks, everything was normal. I began using the basement as a workshop, old shelves, rusted tools, a few wooden crates, and in one corner, that massive white vintage refrigerator. It was so old that the manufacturer's name had almost completely faded. It wasn't plugged in, nor was there any electrical connection. Yet, touching its surface, it felt ice cold. Rachel asked one day, what's inside it? I tried to open the door, but it wouldn't budge. It felt locked from the inside. After several attempts, I gave up and we forgot about it. Late January, 1 a.m. Suddenly, from below, clang, as if a heavy metal door had swung open. I went downstairs and saw the old refrigerator door standing ajar. I was certain it had been shut tight an hour ago. Even stranger, white, misty cold air was billowing out from inside the fridge. I pointed my flashlight inside. Nothing was there, except an old wool blanket and, lying on the floor, a small, rusted metal toy car. As soon as I picked up the toy, Rachel screamed from upstairs, David, where are you? I ran upstairs. Rachel was trembling. She said, a little boy just ran through the kitchen and went down toward the basement. I replied, there's no one in the house except us. She answered, I saw him clearly. The next day, I visited the local library. Digging through old newspapers, I uncovered the history of the house. February 1961, a severe blizzard. The news report stated, a couple's 6-year-old son, Ethan Brooks, went missing. Even after 3 days of searching, he was never found. Every room in the house had been searched, but no one could open that old refrigerator in the basement because it was locked from the inside. The incident remained an unsolved mystery. I showed the news clipping to Rachel. She said nothing for a long moment, then softly asked, should we leave this house? I was still searching for logical explanations, assuming it was all just a series of coincidences. First snowfall of February, 2:47 a.m. That sound returned. Clang. This time, I turned on my phone camera and went downstairs. The refrigerator door was wide open, but this time, a person was standing inside it. Small, no more than 6 or 7 years old, with his back turned to me. He slowly said, Daddy. My blood ran cold. I asked, who are you? He didn't answer. Instead, he began to slowly turn around. As I flashed the light on him, he vanished. The fridge was empty. Right then, my phone screen turned off on its own. Suddenly, from my right side, a very soft voice whispered, why did you close the door? I spun around. No one was there, but the refrigerator door slowly swung shut on its own once again. The next morning, I played back the video on my phone. I was standing alone in the frame. However, in the final 5 seconds of the video, a child's face was clearly visible inside the refrigerator, staring at the camera. His lips were moving. There was no sound, but reading his lips, I could decipher. So cold. I took that video to a local historian, Mr. Alan Pierce. Looking at the video, his face turned pale. He asked, are you still living in that house? I said, yes. He spoke very slowly, then leave before tonight. When I asked why, he explained, the boy didn't vanish in the 1961 storm. His parents believed he had hidden inside that old fridge to escape the cold. But the door locked from the outside. No one knew until it was far too late. My heart sank. That very night, we decided to pack our belongings and leave. One last time, I went down to the basement to retrieve my toolbox. The refrigerator was open again. Inside sat a little boy. He looked at me and smiled. His lips were blue, his face covered in frost. He said softly, it's very cold outside today. Will you come inside with me? Right then, the interior of the refrigerator seemed to expand impossibly, transforming into a dark tunnel. The faint whispering of countless voices echoed from within. I tried to step back, but I couldn't. My feet felt glued to the floor. The boy slowly extended his hand, ice clinging to his fingers. Just as he was about to touch me, Rachel shouted my name from upstairs. That shout shattered the spell. I bolted up the stairs, and we left the house that very night without looking back. Even today, every winter when the temperature drops drastically, a 5-second video arrives on my phone from an unknown sender. It shows that old refrigerator door slowly opening as a child's voice drifts out. It's still very cold in here. Story 5. No one ever lived behind the red basement door, yet the light came on every night. My name is Ryan Carter. I grew up on the west side of Cleveland, Ohio. In March 2024, my wife Ashley and I moved into an old house built in 1936. The house was quite ordinary, but one detail unsettled us from the start. At the far end of the basement sat a small, red wooden door. There was no mention of this door in the original house blueprints. The home inspector noted, "It's probably just old storage." Curiously, the door had no handle, only an old iron bolt on the outside, reinforced with a newly welded steel plate over it. It looked as though someone had taken great pains to ensure that door would never open again. For the first month, we didn't think much of it. Then one night, at precisely 2:58 a.m., the power across our entire house cut out for a second and flickered back on. I went down to check the breaker panel. Reaching the basement, I saw darkness all around, except a thin sliver of yellow light was streaming out from under the red door. I assumed there might be an electrical line on the other side. However, according to the house blueprint, there was supposed to be nothing behind that door except solid concrete. The next day, I was examining the steel plate with a hammer when our elderly neighbor, Mrs. Eleanor Briggs, caught sight of me and stopped. Fearful, she warned, "Don't try to open that." Surprised, I asked why. She paused for a long moment before saying, "I've lived on this street for 60 years. Anyone who tried to open that door didn't stay in that house for long." Once again, I laughed it off as mere local gossip. A few days later, Ashley asked me, "Do you walk around in the basement at night?" I replied, "No." She said, "Every day before dawn, I hear someone walking down the stairs, and then someone softly knocks 3 times on that door." A shiver went down my spine, because I was sleeping right beside her at those times. From then on, the same occurrence repeated every night at 2:58 a.m. Then, light under the red door. One night, gathering my nerve, I pressed my ear against the door. On the other side, people were talking. Multiple voices, some laughing, some whispering. It sounded like an entire family enjoying dinner together. Suddenly, all sound ceased. Then, a little girl said very softly, "Who is standing outside?" My heart froze. I didn't answer. From the other side, the voice spoke again. "He can see us." I went to the city records office and pulled up the original architectural plans for the house. It clearly showed that in 1952, that section of the basement had been completely demolished and filled with fresh concrete. But why? No documents explained the reason. However, in a local newspaper microfilm archive, I found a short report. In 1951, an unidentified room was discovered beneath the house. Inside were furniture, a dining table, and lit candles, but not a single human being. The police report noted, the room appeared as though it had been in use just seconds ago. That very night, I made up my mind to open the door. Ashley tried to stop me, but curiosity won. I cut through the welding to remove the steel plate, then unlatched the old bolt. As I slowly pushed the door open, I was stunned. There was no concrete wall on the other side. Instead, a brightly lit living room greeted me, looking straight out of 1950s America. An old wooden radio was playing. A family sat around a dining table having dinner. 4 adults and a little girl. She looked at me and smiled. "You're very late," she said. Everyone turned to face me simultaneously. But their eyes lacked pupils. They were completely white. I tried to step back, but realized I was no longer standing in the basement. I was standing inside that room, and the door I had entered through was gone. The family members slowly stood up. In unison, they spoke, "Now you will stay with us." Right then, Ashley's voice echoed from a distance, screaming my name. The sound felt miles away. I sprinted forward with all my strength. Everything shook. The lights went out, and I suddenly found myself collapsed on the basement floor. The door was shut. The steel plate was welded back in place as if it had never been touched. We left the house the very next day. However, the story didn't end there. 3 months later, I ran into the new owner. He smiled and said, "The house is great. Just one strange thing." I said nothing. He continued, "Every night at 2:58 a.m., a yellow light streams out from beneath a red door at the far end of the basement." I didn't linger for another moment. Even today, whenever I wake up abruptly in the middle of the night, I feel as though someone is softly whispering right near my ear. Dinner's getting cold. Channel outro. Beneath countless old homes across America, basements still remain whose histories may never be fully known. Many events exist only in family memories. Many doors are locked away forever, and some answers remain buried in the dark. If you enjoyed today's episode of True Horror Vault, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. We will be back soon with more chilling horror stories, eerie mysteries, and dark tales from across America. Until then, if an unfamiliar sound echoes from your basement tonight, take a moment to wonder, is it really just the old pipes? Oh, is someone still waiting down there?